Hello and welcome to another edition of This. We take a look now at this. In defence of trade unions. Trade unions won us civilised working conditions, 2-day weekend, safe working environment, maternity leave, paternity leave, paid holidays and more. Unions get ordinary workers higher wages and better conditions. Sympathy strikes are okay, they're a good thing. This is something which the Thatcher government outlawed and the new Labour government continued to ban. But they are a good thing. They represent worker solidarity. The working majority sticking up for each other against bullying bosses. Unions are not fighting against the public. Unions are the public. It's greedy and oppressive bosses who they are fighting against. The unions did not go too far in the 70s, as is often said in the media. We were starting to make real gains in the UK. The unions were starting to make real gains for the people of the UK. They were defeated by a government whose loyalties lay with the elite minority who own most of the capital. And another thing. The Labour Party, brackets old Labour, set up originally by the unions to represent the ordinary people of the country. Union membership was the ordinary workers of the country. The Tories represented the rich. The Labour movement and Labour Party represented the poorer majority. Tories funded by rich businessmen and landowners, a tiny elite, and represent overwhelmingly their interests. So why on earth shouldn't the unions, which were the closest the country had to a democratic institution of the ordinary majority of the population, be able to have their political party that would represent the broad swathe of the people? However, the Labour Party today has become co-opted by the business interests, i.e. the bosses, rather than the workers of the businesses. Therefore, it would be in the interests of the 99% today to abandon the Labour Party and set up a new party to represent or movement to represent the people. Okay, we left it at that. In defence of nationalisation. Preamble on privatisation. Privatisation was the big thing of the Thatcher government. Railways, the steel industry, all of the industries which had been nationalised in an earlier era were now considered ripe for transfer to private hands. It now seems to be accepted by the mainstream that things should be in private ownership, that this is the natural state of affairs, that it's right and proper. Rationales for privatisation include that the private sector is more efficient. This may be true sometimes, but is certainly not always the case. The main reason that a private enterprise might be more efficient than a state one is competition. When a privatised utility is run by a company with a monopoly on that utility, then there is no such competition. The only incentive for efficiency comes from the regulator, or the distant threat of a revoke of licence or of renationalisation, which never really seems to be on the cards. That things have been privatised and will stay privatised is currently the dominant paradigm. But what were the reasons in the first place for nationalising large companies? Socialist reasons for nationalisation. The workers should control the organisation that they work in. Since the workers of the country are the majority of the population, then one way is to have the people of the country owning the major industries. Nationalisation is then understood as public ownership, i.e. by the people of industry. The role of the government is then to hold these industries in trust for the people and to run them according to the democratic will of the people. When the industry is owned by the people, it can then choose to pay workers the full fruit of their labour, i.e. a much higher and fairer share than if it was run for the profit of the rich. Reasons not limited to socialist paradigm. An industry with a large minimum efficient scale can be considered a natural monopoly. That is, it is far more efficient to run this industry on a national scale, but this would mean only one company, which could then, if left to its own devices, charge monopoly prices. Therefore, the government should step in to ensure monopoly prices are not charged. One way is to nationalise, another way would be to regulate. Nationalising can be a way of preventing a strategic industry being taken over by foreign businesses. Well, it's one thing if you've got countries on the same economic level where, for example, some British companies own some French companies and some French companies own some British companies. So that's pretty much equal and that's fine. But when you've got a poor country and say most of their industries get bought up by British companies but not the other way round, then that's a position of disparity and it's bad for that country's development because the profits get sucked out without corresponding flows in the other direction. Critique. Nationalising key industries could be a step towards a system where workers are democratically controlling their own workplaces. However, in practice, it has tended to mean that a bureaucratic government is running things for people and often not in their best interests. It can still be better, higher wages and less exploitation for the workers than an exploitative capitalist enterprise running the industry. But it is not true socialism if it's run as a top-down chain of command. True socialism is bottom-up, not top-down. In other words, the point of nationalisation is democratic rather than oligopolistic private control of industry, so that investment of resources, management of processes and payment of wages can be run in the interest of workers, both those living in that particular industry and in other industries. In other words, it's run for the benefit of the workers, who are overwhelmingly the same group as the general public. But a hierarchical state-run system of elected representatives, rather than participatory democracy, alongside a bureaucratic top-down run civil service and with an industrial management structure of top-down chains of command, is only a very limited step towards genuine worker control of industry, but it could be a start. Critique of efficiency of privatisation. Increased so-called efficiency is often in the form of paying workers lower wages. So that's not really increased efficiency. They're just paying people less and they're calling that increased efficiency, which is rather disingenuous. Making them work more hours, making them obey more flexible conditions, flexible on the boss's terms, not flexible on the workers' terms. They, the workers, have to be more flexible for the company, while the company does not reciprocate. In other words, efficiency simply means exploiting people more. Problems with privatisation, not in theory but in practice, include the case of selling the family silver. That is, the process of privatisation is often corrupt. Utilities and industries are sold off at below true value to government cronies, with corporations reaping the gains but the public purse losing out. This constitutes a theft of public resources by the private sector and a transfer of wealth from the poor to the rich. This has been particularly the case in developing countries pressured into privatisation by rich countries whose corporations were able to buy up developing country public resources on the cheap and reap the profits.